Lesson 3 has quite a bit going on, so I'm going to actually do this over 2 videos, but we're learning about the basics of variables and math in Java. So let's just do the first half here. I've got a note that says basic math can be done in a variables assignment. Okay, so right here I've done like a simple division. This would initialize the variable speed with 6. And then I've got a little bit more complicated division here done over a double. So we'll see some sort of decimal there, I don't know, probably around 40. And then you can also do basic math within a print statement. You'll notice here that I didn't use any quotation mark containers. If I did put quotation mark containers around this, it would become a string literal, and it would simply print those characters exactly how you see them there. Uh, if I don't put the character string literal container around it, now it would actually do the math. So it's going to print the result of 8 plus 4 minus 1. So we'll see the number 11 appear. And then, like I said, for time, we're going to see some decimal. We'll figure out what actually is 100 divided by 2.3. So it turns out that we see the 11 there, and 100 divided by 2.3 was actually 43.478, roughly. Okay. You'll notice too, sometimes with doubles that the last digit or two might be wrong, like if you checked it on a calculator, and we'll talk about that more later. It has to do with how math's done in binary and whatnot. But for right now, this looks good. Okay. Here's our basic math operators. You've obviously got addition and subtraction. We use the asterisk for multiplication, so shift 8. And we use that forward slash, the one that's on the question mark key on your keyboard, for division. And then you'll notice I've got this percentage sign here. So a lot of you are probably seeing that for the first time as a math operator. Okay, we call that the modulus or the modulo operator. It yields the remainder of a division. All right, so let's check it out here. Let's turn off these comments. And this first one here, we have to think to ourselves, okay, if I divided 19 by 5, 19 divided by 5 is 3.8 if we think of it as a decimal. But if we go back to like third grade before you did decimals and you did remainders, your teacher would have had you write that answer as 3 remainder 4. And so what we're going to see is that 4. The modulo gives the remainder. So in this case, it would give 4. All right. Well, 100 divided by 20 doesn't have a remainder. So, I mean, we'd probably just write 5, but technically you could say it's 5 remainder 0. So this should yield 0. There is no remainder. And then 2 divided by 7 is weird because 7 doesn't go into 2. It goes 0 times. So technically there's a remainder of 2 left over at that point. All right. So I'm predicting that we're going to see 4, 0, and 2 from each of these new print statements that we see. And that's what we see right here. Okay. So the modulo operator gives the remainder. You might need to go back to grade school and practice some long divisions with remainders until you get the hang of that. Okay. APCSA only requires modulo for 2 positive int values. Some weird things happen if you throw in negatives or decimals. You can play around with it on your own, but bottom line is we don't need to concern ourselves with that. We just need to know its application to 2 positive ints. The order of operations applies in everything that we do mathematically in Java. In fact, it's very, very strict. We'll learn throughout the year. So when we're doing basic math, multiplication and division, as well as modulo, have first precedence, and addition and subtraction have second precedence, just like you would have done in an algebra class with the addition of this modulo operator. So if we look at this print line that I have right here, this is going to give me not 15 times 2. Okay, it's not going to do that addition first, even though it occurs first. It's actually going to work out of order. It's going to do the multiplication first for 10, and then 10 plus 10 is going to give me 20. So we'll see 20 printed. We won't see 30. And you could, I encourage you to go ahead right now, maybe experiment a little bit more with some other combinations of these. Throw a modulo in there, throw some subtraction in. But for the most part, it's just going to be like algebra class with the addition of this new operator. Right. Another weird thing that happens in Java is something called integer math, and this particularly applies to division. So I have a division here where I've asked for the division of 9 by 5. Now, I've been taught that, this would be 1.8, or again, maybe you'd say 1 remainder 4. It's not actually going to print either of those two. So it's not going to print 1.8. It's not going to print 1 remainder 4. It's actually just going to print the number 1. So in Java, if you do a math operation exclusively with integers, then the result will be exclusively done with integers. And anything that doesn't result in an integer is just thrown away. So notice that it didn't like round this number up to 2 to force it into an int. It actually just truncated that decimal, just threw it away. And it said that the result was 1. Okay. Now that's a rule. One thing about computers, sometimes they don't do what we think they're going to do, but once we learn what they do the same thing every time. So we need to learn those rules and then just be comfortable in applying them over and over. I'll warn you right now. I mean, obviously, this is the start of school. We'll come back to this again, but this is a favorite trick question of an AP exam. So you'll probably see it once or twice in the multiple choice questions where they try to set you up to be tricked. And it might even show up in the free response where they try to get you to write a line of code that actually won't result in the correct division, because you've ended up dividing two int values. So this is something that we're going to see over and over. Okay. And this shows up here too in my variable declaration of num, right? We might think to ourselves that, oh, that's 3.75. That's not what's actually going to take place. Okay. For one thing, num is an int by declaration. So it couldn't store 3.75. That would actually result in an error if you tried to put that number directly in. So this is why it divides this particular way, is to avoid an error. It throws away all decimals, all floating points associated with the math. That way it understands that it would always be safe to put this result into an int type variable. And so we're just going to see the number 3 print here. Now, a little bit strange though, compared to what we just saw right there, is that here I've declared my variable as a double. And so I think very often a student who sees this for the first time then thinks that, oh, that means that this is going to encourage a double division. It actually doesn't work that way. And it's kind of related to the order of operations. So what happens here is that this calculation is done sort of independent of everything else. And then at the end of the calculation, it tries to assign it back from right to left onto the variable. So the variable type actually has no role in this. So again, I know our first instinct might be to think, okay, this is 0.75 and we could put that into the double. That's not actually what takes place. Again, once it sees that this is a division involving two integers, it forces the integer division to occur, and it truncates it. It throws away anything associated with the floating point. And so we actually see 0. Let me turn on my print line. The one thing that will be a little bit different about this one is that instead of printing just 0, it will print 0.0, okay, which is maybe even more confusing. But the reason it printed 0.0 is anytime you print a double, it's going to force it to appear as a double, a floating point. So part of the memory has been assigned to the left, part to the right, and it's going to always show you both ends of it. All right, so see right here, 0.0. It did not result in 0.75 is the most important thing to remember there, because it was forcing that integer division to occur. All right, so I'm going to pause right here with our first video, and I'll just before I do that, I'll show you. I put a couple links down here to some helper sites, and the first one's a great one, just real short little site, just tells you all the basics of the stuff I went over. Okay, so read that on your own. The second link is way more exhaustive, and it's got like everything you could possibly want to learn about all this stuff. And a lot of this stuff isn't even part of the AP exam, but if you're just real curious and you want to learn a little bit more, go for it.